Alright folks, so in today's video I'm going to talk about a very dark topic. This is regarding Japan's 80-50 epidemic. In fact, this epidemic affects many Asian countries, such as their neighboring South Korea and China. So what do I mean by 80-50? So 80 typically means the 80-year-old Japanese grandmother, or sometimes she's just a mother because her son does not have a child. And right now it's estimated there are at least 1 million Japanese men that are into their 50s or their 60s that's living at home with their mothers. And they're not going to work, they're not going to school, they're not going to any clubs or any social events. They just stay home and play video games and watch movies all day because of their extreme depression. And do you know what's led to this? First of all, I mentioned this many times before. Throughout history, a very small percentage of man has actually got to reproduce. It's estimated worldwide to be 30 to 40%. Because back then there were so many conflicts. Every time there's a conflict, men are drafted into the military. Many men simply died in battle. Also, and people always want to talk about, we live in the patriarchy. People want to talk about the past rulers, the kings, the conquerors, the Genghis Khans. How many conquerors, how many kings, how many emperors have there been throughout history? You imagine, let's say somebody like Genghis Khan. He's probably had what, 10,000, 20,000 women? So if a king has 10,000 women, you know what that means, right? That means that 9,999 men died alone. Sex has never been free for a man. For a man to get a girl throughout history, he has always had to provide something. So the guys who were extremely broke back in the day, or they were extremely weak, right? They could not produce enough grains to feed himself or to feed a family. Those guys simply died alone. And it is because of this, male baby infants were always more desirable. Because back then, when people were extremely poor, right, you needed people to work on the field, to do hard physical labor. I'm sorry, ladies, this is just a biological fact. That the fact that men are stronger. So way back then, way before abortion was a thing, do you know what people did? We committed unspeakable crimes against humanity. Many societies, especially Asian societies, were obsessed about having a boy as a child. This is absolutely sick. And millions of these parents, they committed child infanticide. That's exactly what it sounds like. Baby is born, no penis. That's the reality. So throughout history, at birth, there has always been more male versus female. And China's one-child policy has made this system so much worse. There were so many gender-selective abortions. And as a result of this, between Gen Z and millennial Chinese, there's over 40 million more men versus women. Also, along with the rise of third-wave feminism, dating has become so much harder, especially for the Asian men. I'm sure many of you guys know the term passport bros. Listen, anytime there's an interracial marriage that takes place in the Asian society, over 90% of the time, it's between an Asian woman and a non-Asian man. Most of the time, it's a white Western male, sometimes Asian and black, sometimes Asian Mexican, sometimes Asian Indian. Over 90% of the time, it's an Asian woman marrying out. That's just the reality. And if you look at all the surveys conducted worldwide, the least desirable ethnicity for male, the group that always comes out at the very, very bottom is Asian men. That's why I said life is not fair, right? Diversity, equity, inclusion, it's all bullshit. That's just the way the world is set up. Listen, hookup culture is just simply 5% of men sleeping around with 90% of the women. A guy doesn't care. A guy could be a top tier, a millionaire, top 1% man. If a woman that's well below average, that's a 2, 3, or 4, if he goes up to the guy and says, you know what, my cookie is free for the night, of course the guy's gonna smash. Guys don't care. So what this leaves our society with, especially in the Asian society, in countries like Japan, in South Korea, and in China, is that there are tens of millions of men who ends up dying alone. I mentioned this in the past before. The fact that, I'm 31 years old. I tried dating for 12 years with zero success. I couldn't even find a single date. The standard in modern society, especially in Asia, for dating a woman, for marrying a girl, has gone off the charts. I didn't come up with these numbers. You can look up this. This is news from South Korea. This is the official figures by the South Korean government. For an average South Korean man to get married in 2024, he needs to have an estimated net worth of 200,000 US dollars. 200,000 US dollars. Do you know why? Because the marriage requirement in many Asian countries today is that the guy has to have a house. Typically in Asia, it's a condo. So on average, for example, in China, you need a 3-bedroom, 1-bathroom condo. The average size is about 100 square meters or 1,076 square feet. That's the average. You're expected to have a car. It has to be a certain level. For example, you cannot have a 15-year-old Prius. It has to be at least a brand new Honda Civic. And in China, they also ask for a cash payment, typically at least 200,000 Chinese dollars or roughly 28,000 US dollars. I'm not making this up. You can look this up. This is, by the way, this is not if you want to date some swimsuit model or some actress coming out of China. That is just any girl off the street. They ask you for, 28,000 US dollars. And on top of that, you have to pay for the wedding in full. You have to pay for the honeymoon 100% out of your pocket. On top of that, you have to buy at least 4 pieces of jewelry for your girl. And on top of that, you have to spend at least 3 months of your salary on a wedding ring. If you think I'm joking, you can look this up. This is all 100% real. This is also the reason why that what happens is all of the women, all the requirements they're listing ends up being a very small percentage of men. If you look at the dating in China, all the top 1% men, they all have a bunch of side women. In China, it's called a 小三, little three. That roughly translates to mistresses in English. Sometimes what happens is these top-tier men, they bring up their wife to dating shows and they confront them with their mistresses and they have these huge fights. And sometimes it's hard to feel sorry for these women. I'm sorry, ladies. You ask for all of these requirements. So what ends up happening is that you all end up meeting the same guy. And the same thing is happening on mainland China, in Taiwan, in Hong Kong, in South Korea, and in Japan. So many of these men, they end up becoming so broken. So many of these men, they can try their hardest, since their teens, since their 20s, 30s, and 40s. And they've been rejected so many times that they've completely given up on life. They've been driven to a rapid state of depression. In Japanese, this is officially diagnosed as a medical condition. There's a word for it. And this word in Japanese, it's called the hikikomori, which means a form of severe social withdrawal. This is the results of decades of rejection by women in society. These men, they get so severely depressed. Many of them have to be put on antidepressants. Many of them have to see a clinical psychiatrist regularly because of their rapid depression to the point of no return. It gets to the point where they get to a certain age. For many of these men, it's sometime in their 40s, where they can no longer go to work anymore in order to support themselves. So they're forced to move back with their 80-year-old mothers and live off of their pension. And this is not because of they're lazy, they're unmotivated, because their mind has been in such a state of shock to the point that they can no longer sustain and function as a human being. And many of these Japanese men, they end up marrying robots. I'm not making up any of this. Right now, there are at least 1 million Japanese men over the age of 50 that's living at home, that's not working, that's living off the mother's pension. This is what our society has become. And yes, you can actually die from a broken heart by facing constant rejections throughout your life. Broken heart syndrome, or known as Takotsubo cardiomyopathy. This is a reaction. Your heart has a surge of stress hormones caused by emotionally stressful event. The broken heart syndrome can cause the heart to stop beating, resulting in complete heart failure. This is where our world has led us. It's our ancestors that did this. It's their obsession with having baby boys, especially in the Asian culture. Even in a perfect world, even if let's say all of the marriages are still arranged by the parents, every guy gets matched up with a girl, there will be at least in the Asian culture anywhere between 10 to 20% of men that will never ever find a match. And they have no choice. This is why some of them fall into a rapid state of depression. And this is what's so dangerous about third wave feminism. I mentioned this many times before, because all of the women are searching for the top tier man. This is where China is becoming. Now they have this new trend. On top of the leftover man, there are tens of millions of leftover women in China. It used to be that when a woman hits 27 in China, if she still has not found a man, if she has not found a husband, she's considered a 剩女, or a leftover woman. But now they push the age back to 30 because there are so many 剩女 that the Chinese women are getting freaked out. Ladies, do you know what man value? The man that you want, the high value man? Man value youth, man value purity, and man value beauty. What makes you think that? For example, if a guy is hyper successful, top tier man, he has multiple women pursuing him. Let's say if they're all based, all feminine, all attractive, right? All virgins. One of them is 40-year-old. One of them is 35, one of them is 30, one of them is 25, and one of them is 20. Who do you think the guy's gonna choose? No guy's gonna choose the 30 or 35 or the 40-year-old. In fact, if given the choice, every single man out there will choose the 20-year-old. That's attractive, that's a virgin, that will submit to their man. So many women out there, you talk to them in modern society, they say, oh, I'm a career woman. I gotta focus on my career. I gotta become a doctor. I gotta get my PhD. I wanna become a lawyer. I want to become a scientist. It doesn't matter how attractive you are right now. As every day goes by, you're becoming less and less attractive. Your best chance to secure a high value man is when you're young. You can go to university. When you're graduating, when you're 21, 22, 23-year-old, you really got to start looking because time is not on your side. You have a biological clock and there's nothing you can do to fight it. And the most dangerous part about all of this, if you look at the studies, for example, if you look at the violent people throughout history, for man and woman it's roughly equal. Man's a slight advantage, maybe 51 or 52%. However, if you look at the most violent people throughout history, every single one of them is man. The guys who committed the worst crimes against humanity throughout mankind's 200,000 year history. If you go back and look at Adolf Hitler, look at Joseph Stalin, look at Benito Mussolini, look at Emperor Hirohito, look at Genghis Khan, look at King Leopold. The most dangerous, the most vicious, the most evil people throughout history have all been men. So what happens with this, with Japan's 80-50 crisis, with the birth of excess males, with the rise of third wave feminism, is that it creates lonely, it creates dangerous, violent, desperate men. This is why every single mass shooter, it's a male. Every single case. I believe that we're headed back to a very dangerous time for human history, because there are so many single men out there. For the first time in the Western society, if you look at all the surveys taking place in Canada, in the United States, in Western Europe, in Australia, over 50% of men are single now. For all the ladies complaining about the men you're with, about the guy's abuser, the fact that he's toxic, he's an alcoholic, he's a drug addict, listen, over 50% of men are single now. Under the age of 30, it's anywhere between 60 to 70%. So you don't want the majority of men. You're choosing the guy that's toxic. That's the guy you chose. There's a reason why over 90% of the deaths from drug overdoses are men. There's a reason why the vast majority of perpetrators of violent crimes are men. As we're heading to the peak of this internet dating, of hookup culture, of third wave feminism, what you will end up seeing that there will be less and less safe spaces for women. Anywhere you go, you're more likely to get stalked at nighttime. You're more likely to get raped. You're more likely to get kidnapped, to get assaulted, to be a victim of violent crime, because there are so many single, desperate, lonely men. These men, they will be depressed, they will be angry, they will be vicious, and they will aim to destroy this world. And if this trend does not get reversed anytime soon, the Western society is gonna soon look like a third world country. I'm sorry, but that's just the reality.